Well, of course, the Springboks, as always, will be sort of measured in their performance against the All Blacks. Do you believe that the Boks have the depth and the talent to beat the All Blacks? And again, going back to game plan and strategy, if Alistair Coetzee is likely to stick to his knitting and sort of employ that Stormers kind of approach, quite conservative, quite defensive, I mean, how do they change that?
Yeah, the tricky thing is that coaches' instincts tend to be, in times of crisis, they sort of almost retreat into themselves. So I'm just wondering whether Alistair isn't wrestling with the idea of becoming almost blatantly more conservative, pulling back the leash a little bit and saying, guys, let's play a more percentage-based rugby. Let's try to impose ourselves more physically. That's an area where the Springboks have actually come up quite short in the last few weeks. I think they failed to really stamp the authority up front. And we're a proud nation at sort of bullying opponents. We couldn't do it really against Ireland, and we didn't do it against Argentina, who showed every bit as much and probably more mongrel really than we did in the forward exchanges. So that's a big issue going forward. And the All Blacks, not only have they got a strong pack anyway, a pack that's not going to be too afraid of coming up with the Springboks under current circumstances, but the broadness of their game plan as a whole makes it look very daunting. I mean, it's at this stage, that away game could potentially shape up as a really ugly one for South Africa unless a lot of things fall into place in the next while. But of course, we mustn't jump the gun and go straight to that All Black game. First, we need to make sure that we beat a similarly sort of crisis-torn Australia away, because the Aussies are in a complete shambles. And it's almost going to be more embarrassing if South Africa lose, especially if it happens to be convincingly, to the Aussies on their own patch. I mean, where does that leave us then? It means we've lost then to Argentina twice and already perhaps one down against the Wallabies. Let's hope it doesn't happen, but it's quite possible. You're looking at two very fragile sides. So we mustn't be too obsessed with jumping to the All Black game ahead of thinking, we've just got to work out how to beat the Australians to regain a little bit of our self-respect initially. So many boxes to have to be ticked in the next fortnight. It's quite scary from a Springbok perspective.
And Rob, let's talk about it being a rebuilding phase. I mean, the All Blacks are calling it a rebuilding phase as well. What are they doing right that the Springboks are doing wrong?
I just think that they have, I think all their Super Rugby franchises have this kind of mutual buy-in as to how to play rugby. So when a player from, whether it's from the Chiefs or the Highlanders or the Hurricanes, gets into that All Black setup, they all know exactly which buttons to push or what the desired way ahead is. I think the country speaks fairly uniformly on their rugby, whereas in South Africa you've got this sort of almost ideological clash, and the All Blacks just, as I say, it's a seamless intervention. As soon as and you saw with Anton Leonard-Brown at the weekend, he comes into the side and just fits like a glove into midfield. Looks like he's been there for 50 internationals. So it just seems an easier fit whenever they introduce new faces into their team at the moment. Whereas our guys come in sort of riddled with sort of insecurity and almost paranoia about what is expected of me, what's the plan. So I don't envy any Bok newcomer right now.
And Rob, finally, sadly, often what happens in the wake of these sort of low points in SA rugby, it comes down to politics, and people will put it down to enforced quotas, and there's obviously also been some politics at the higher levels of SA rugby with the president stepping down and all of that sort of investigation that's ongoing. What do you have to say about all of that?
Yeah, look, I mean, at times like this, inevitably people sort of combine Springbok sort of difficulties with the political landscape. You have to be careful not to be sort of overly emotional. It is a reality. It's something that exists. We're not going to ever be able to sort of get away from it. And we have to remember that there have been some pretty poor, when there was less political pressure a few years ago, we've also had some serious video nasties in the sort of post-isolation era. Some really heavy reverses, even during the early stages of Jake White's tenure. I mean, there were some shocking Springbok performances, like the 49-0 against the Wallabies. This current side hasn't quite plumbed those depths yet. We hope that's not just on the horizon. But so we need to keep that in mind. The Rudolf Stroyle period, where he kept changing, left, right, and centre. Players came and players went, and there were just lots of sort of very mediocre players. And I'm afraid at the moment we have to maybe just sort of bite the bullet and acknowledge that we've got we're very vulnerable. We've lost a lot of players to overseas shores, and what's left behind is not necessarily of a level that we've known before.
Yeah.
Politics is a complicator. It adds that extra sort of 10 or 20% of difficulty, and an extra degree of difficulty.